Welcome to teaching learning session of sociology. Today we'll discuss Karl Marx. Karl Heinrich Marx was a German philosopher, critic of political economy, economist, historian, sociologist, political theorist, journalist, and socialist revolutionary. Biographical sketch of Karl Marx. Let's start with the biographical sketch of the Karl Marx. We can divide the life of Karl Marx into 5 phases: early years, Berlin days, in Paris, revolutionary Marx, and exile. He has gone a lot throughout his life. Early years. Karl Heinrich Marx was the second child and the eldest son of Heinrich and Henrietta Marx. He was born on 5th May 1818 in German Rhineland, where his father Heinrich Marx practiced law. So he was son of Heinrich and Henrietta Marx. Marx belongs to Jewish community of Germany. In the period that Napoleon ruled Germany, the Jews had taken advantage of opening of trades and professions which were previously barred to them. In 1828, after Napoleon's defeat, the Congress Vienna assigned the German Rhineland to the Prussian kingdom. The Germany was again divided into feudally organized kingdom. The Jews once more faced the racial, political, and religious barrier. Karl Marx joined the University of Bonn as a student in the Faculty of Law. In the autumn of 1836, he was transferred to the University of Berlin. So he was the second child and the eldest son of Heinrich and Henrietta Marx. Right here, Karl Marx was born in Germany, and he belonged to the Jewish family, and his father was a lawyer there. But after the defeat of after the Napoleon's defeat, the Germany was divided into feudally organized kingdom, and then again Jews faced racial, political, and religious barrier, and it created a problem for Jew community. Karl Marx joined the University of Bonn in 1836, and then he was transferred to the University of Berlin. Now Berlin days. Now he was transferred from Bonn, he was transferred to Berlin. Karl Marx years in the University of Berlin were spent under the impact of Hegelian philosophy. He was under the impact of Hegel, and you will see this impact in his theory, that is historical dialectism. He was very much impressed by Hegel. From Eduard Gans, Marx learned the method of theoretical criticism. That is why he was a political critic. So from Eduard Gans, Marx learned the theoretical critics. This led young Marx to try and construct a rival system of Hegelian ideas of positivism. Hegel has given the theory of dialects, right? And then Marx was impressed by the Hegel, and he learned the theoretical criticism from the Eduard Gans, and Marx tried to construct a rival system of Hegelian ideas of positivism. Hegel has given the theory of dialect, and Hegel theory was based on the ideas of positivism, but Marx has given the theory of historical dialectism, and it is based on the material. Marx gave up his studies of law and immersed himself in philosophy. He started with law, but then he switched to philosophy. When it became clear to him that in Germany he could not speak and write freely, he decided to emigrate to France. After his marriage in 1843, he left for France. So he started his studies in Bonn University and then shifted to the Berlin. Then he was enrolled in the law, but he gave up law and immersed himself in the philosophy. He was impressed by the Hegel and the Edward Gans, and then he started writing. And because in Germany the conditions were like that he found that he could not speak and write freely. So he, in 1843, he decided to emigrate to the France. Now in Paris, the third phase is in Paris. In the middle of 19th century, when Karl Marx arrived in the Paris, the French capital mirrored the unparalleled phenomenon of socio-economic, political, and cultural upheaval in Europe. That was the time where Europe was going through a lot, right? There was a socio-economic, political, and cultural changes were going on. People revolted against the church. It was the era, this was the scientific era, right? So many things were going on in Europe. He had one question in his mind: what was the reason for the failure of French Revolution? He began comparing the socio-economic condition of France and Germany. There, when he went to Germany, he saw many differences in Germany and Paris, and he began to compare the socio-economic conditions of France and Germany in Paris. Karl Marx accepted the view of structure. He believed in the fact of formal relation between the elements of process of human history. In Paris, he met F. Engels, who was a German radical and a revolutionary, and this Friedrich Engels impacted Karl Marx a lot. So in Germany, he met Friedrich Engels. Friedrich Engels was a German radical and a revolutionary. That is why we call Karl Marx as a revolutionist. Marx's brief but very productive spell in Marx ended in begin of 1845 when he was expelled from the Paris because of his thoughts. He was expelled from the Paris too in 1845. He left Paris for Brussels with the family. He was joined in Brussels by his friend Engels. Friedrich Engel. So in 1800, he spent a very little time or a very short period of time in the Paris, and because of his ideas, because of his revolutionary ideas, he was expelled from the Paris, and then he left from Paris. He left Paris for Brussels, and the Friedrich Engel then joined Marx in Brussels. While in touch with various German communist workers' organizations with branches in various European cities, Karl Marx decided to set up an international organization of workers. Uh, uh, in Brussels, this Karl Marx was in contact with various German communist workers. He saw the pathetic conditions of the workers. He saw how workers are oppressed or exploited. So he was in touch with the various German communist workers organization. They have various branches in various European cities. And then Marx decided to set up an international organization of workers. So he set up an international organization of the workers. This was the beginning of the period when the scholar Marx turned into a visionary of revolution. Now he started. He when he set up an international organization of the worker. Now this in during this period, this scholar Marx turned into revolutionary visionary. Now revolutionary Marx. Now the another phase of life of Marx is revolutionary Marx. He uh, took step against the oppressors, or he was by the side of the oppressed class. Revolutionary Marx, uh, working with the Communist League, a federation of workers, Karl Marx became an organizer and a leader of Revolutionary Party. So he was in contact with the workers of the various worker organization, right? And he developed an international organization of the workers and become an organizer and a leader of various revolutionary parties. In 1847, the London branch of Communist League entrusted him with the writing a document which would spell aims and objectives of the party. So he joined a party, right, and he became the organizer and the leader of the party. In 1847, the London branch of Communist League, as we said that they have the branches in the various cities of the Europe. So the London branch of the Communist League entrusted him with the writing of document which would spell the aims and objectives of the party. So he wrote the aims and objective of the party. Marx produced a documentary early in 1948. It was called the Manifesto of Communist Party. It is very important that in 1848, Karl Marx wrote the Manifesto of Communist Party. That is the objectives and the vision and the aims of the party. The proletarians have nothing to lose but their chains. They have a word to win. Workers of the world unite. So in this, he tried to unite the workers of the world. According to him, they have nothing to lose. They have lost everything because workers are up. They are the oppressed class. Oppressors are oppressing the workers. They have nothing to lose. They don't have anything. If they have something to lose, that is their chains, and they should lose those chains. And he tried to unite the worker together, right? Now, exile. The last phase is the exile. He left for England and arrived in London in 1849. He lived there until his death in 1883. So, in 1849, from Brussels, he left the Brussels and come to the London, and he lived there until 1883. With his family and close friends, he led a life of relative inactivity and material poverty. This forced inactive life, of course, helped him to develop as a thinker. Now, from revolutionary Marx, now this is thinker. Marx has been developed as a thinker, right? So, because of the inactive life, and this inactive life forced him to develop as a thinker. And in 1864, when Workers' International was formed in London, Marx joined its executive committee as a representative of German artisans in London. Marx took charge of the organization and delivered its inaugural address, which contained a socio-economic survey of working class from 1848 to 1864. Right. So in 1864, he became a representative of Workers International, right, from Germany. And in this international, right, he delivered an inaugural address in which he discussed about the socio-economic survey of the working class from 1848 to 1864. The international grew fast and Marx controlled its activities from London. Now again he became active. While involved in these preoccupations, Marx published in 1867 the first volume of Das Kapital. Das Kapital is one of the important book authored by Karl Marx. He published Das Kapital in 1867. The second and third volume of this were edited after Marx's death by the Engels. Russian visited Karl Marx in London. He welcomed them and talked about his mission in life. The missionary was to overthrow the capitalist society. He inspired the Russian revolutionary. So, during his exile phase, he was forced to live an inactive life in the London, and he reached London in 1849 and lived there till 1883. Right, and because he was forced to live an inactive life, he developed as a thinker, and then he joined the Workers International, right, as an executive member, and he delivered an opening address, inaugural address in that Workers International, and in that he presented a survey that is on the socio-economic conditions of worker from 1848 to 1864, and now he became active again, and that he controlled the activities of Workers International. Right, in 1867 he published Das Kapital, and the first volume of Das Kapital, and the second and third volume was edited after his death by the Engels. And Russians were very much impressed by the Karl Marx, and they visited him in the London, and they talked about his mission in life. And the mission of Karl Marx was to overthrow the capitalist society, and he inspired the Russian revolutionaries for this. Right, so we can divide. So this was a brief biographical sketch of Karl Marx. Socio-historical background. The 18th and 19th century witnessed a wide sweeping economic changes across Europe. A scientific revolution was there, industrial revolution was there, French Revolution took place. So there was a much uphill in the Europe, and Europe has witnessed an economic changes across Europe. Most of the changes were taking place in the economic sphere. With coming of the industrial economy, the earlier form of the feudal society underwent a significant changes. Right, there was a feudal system before this industrial system or the capitalist system. Because of this coming of this industrial economy, this impacted the feudal society. This feudal society underwent a significant change, and this has given rise to the capitalistic society. There was a shift from a feudalism to capitalism. Right? That this industrial system, because of the changes in the society, the feudalistic society converted into the capitalistic society. There was a shift from feudalism to capitalism. There was a stream of migration from rural to urban industrial area, because they in feudal system they preferred to the main livelihood as farming. Right, now the feudal system, this feudalism has changed to, there is a shift from feudalism to capitalism, and the capitalist set up their factories or the industries in the urban area, and people were forced to move in search of jobs from rural area to the urban area. So there was a migration from rural to urban area. In the process of rapid urbanization and horrible working situation of industrial workers led to a widespread poverty and social distress among them. Now the capitalist, when the people started moving from rural area to the urban area in search of jobs, where the urbanization, that the this industrialization leads to the formation of the urban area or the urbanization. It has given rise to the concept of urbanization. Right, and now because when the people started, when more and more people started moving from rural area to the urban area, this has created various types of the problems for the working class. The situation of working class was pathetic. They were forced to live in slums. There was a widespread poverty because capitalists exploited the worker class, and there was a distress among the working class. These specific historic conditions influenced Marx very much, and gradually his increasing engagement with economic questions and economic problems. He saw all these conditions of the working class. He saw the pathetic conditions of the working class. Now, this influenced the Marx, and gradually his engagement gradually, and this has given his engagement with the economic questions of the economic problem. An important influence on him was his reading of Engels, The Condition of Working Class in England in 1844. Marx and Engels developed their philosophy of communism and became the intellectual leader of the working class movement. That he met Engels in the Paris and he was influenced by his reading, and now they developed, Marx and Engels together developed the philosophy of communism. We'll discuss about all these philosophies. What is communism? Marx and Engels developed the philosophy of communism and they become the intellectual leader of the working class. Now they become the leader of the Engels, and the Marx become the leader of the working class. Even Engels was a revolutionary leader, and with his influence, Marx become revolutionary and they become the leader of the working class. Intellectual influences. Marx was largely influenced by the German philosopher and idealism of his days. He was influenced by the George William Friedrich Hegel on the basis on the because he was very much impressed by the philosopher Hegel. Hegel has given the theory of dialectism, and through this he developed. Through this, he has taken the inspiration, and Marx developed a theory of historical dialectism. Hegel's theory was based on the ideas. It was on the ideas of positivism, but Marx said that it is not the ideas but material. He has taken the material as a center stage for this theory, and he was impressed by the Ludwig Feuerbach. Idealistic philosophy lay emphasis on the ideas, that is, reason for the understanding of social change. Hegel explained dialectics in terms of three elements: thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. So he has that the Hegel theory was the idea was based on the ideas of positivism, and Hegel explained the dialectics in terms of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Marx accepted the Hegel ideas of dialect but didn't agree with the emphasis on the ideas. He agreed with the theory that yes, theory is correct, but he didn't agree with the emphasis on the ideas. Instead, ideas, Marx brought a materialistic forces or material forces and developed the idea of dialect materialism, historical dialectical materialism, right? So, in Hegel's theory, the central stage was the of the theory was the idea, and in Marx's theory of dialects, the central stage for the theory was the material forces. He examined the dialect relationship with the capitalist and the proletariat. Basis of capitalism is exploitation of the working class, and this exploitation will create a condition of the working class to revolt and overthrow the capitalism itself. Right? So, according to Marx, the capitalist exploits the proletariats or the working class, and this exploitation of this working class will create the condition one day that working class will revolt against this capitalism and will overthrow capitalism itself, right? Ludwig Berg was a German philosopher influenced the Marx, while Hegel believed that the real man emanates from the divine. Back argued that the real man is one living in the real material world. What attracted Marx to the Feuerbach was the idea that emphasis on the material basis of religion. Okay. Materialistic perspective, because Marx is a materialistic sociologist. The center idea of his philosophy is material, mode of production. So his theory, all his theories are based on the material. The center idea of all of his theory is material. The materialistic perspective. So materialistic perspective of Karl Marx is very important. The materialistic perspective is at the center of Marx's analysis of the society. It is the center of Marx's analysis of the society. According to Marx, whatever is happening in society is because of the materials. Every change in the society is based on materials. According to Marx, the structure and development of society is conditioned by the material conditions or the economic factors of the society. So, society totally depends on the economy. Every change, every development of the society, any social change, any structural changes, or and the structure of the society and the development of the society depends on the economic conditions, right, or the materialistic conditions of that society. Marx's general ideas about society are known as his theory of historical materialism. Major points of historical materialism are economic structure of society is most important one. Economy determines the politics and the culture of the society. Instead of ideas, economic structure determines the political and the legal superstructure. The society is seen as a structure having at its base economy, the infrastructure. So, according to Marx, everything is based on the economy, on material forces. He has given the historical materialism theory, and according the theory, the main points of the theory are economic structure of the society are the most important. Economy matters a lot. Then economy determines the politics and the culture of the society. True that economics or the materials defines the politics and the culture of the society, and instead of ideas, it's not the ideas but the economic structure determines the political, cultural, and the legal superstructure. Political and the legal superstructure, right? The economic infrastructure of society is made up of forces and relation of production. The superstructure of society is based on the relation of production. So, economic infrastructure of the society is made of forces and relations of production, and the superstructure of society is based on the relations of production. Other aspects of society as history, politics, law, religion, education are influenced by economic structure. According to Marx, everything, whether it's politics, whether it's history, whether it's law, whether it's religion, whether it's culture, education, they are influenced by the economic structure. Everything depends on the economic structure. This was the materialistic perspective of the Marx, that economy was the center or the mode of production, or material is the center of his theories. And according to him, everything, whether it's legal, whether it's politics, whether it's education, whether it's culture, everything else depends on the economic conditions of the society. Political economic perspectives. Now, what is political economic perspective? Political economy refers to interface between politics and economy. So, political economy, as the name suggests, this is an interface between the politics and economy. Politics, and economy go hand in hand. Engel explained that political economy, in terms of laws that govern production and exchange of material, means of substances. So Engel explained that political economy, how he explained the political economy. Engel explained the political economy in terms of laws that govern production, right, and exchange of material, means of substances. Marx did not discuss the concept of political economy but developed a critique of it. Right. According to Marx, even the commodity has two kinds of value attached to it, the use value and the exchange value. Right. So how Marx defined a commodity, that is Marx defined the commodity that it has a value, that every commodity has a value. This is the basic concept of marketing, right? That there should be the exchange of commodity which has a value. There are two type of the value, that use value and the exchange value. Use value is which satisfy the needs of the consumer, and the exchange value is what if you want that product, what will you give in return? Or in simple terms, I say, if I want to buy a pen, it has a use value for me. I need it for writing, right? But there must be an exchange value. I have to pay something in return, right? I have to purchase that. That is the exchange value. That is in if I want one product, I have to give something else. This is exchange value. So according Marx has said that commodity has two kinds of value, that is the use value and the exchange value. Adam Smith and David Ricardo suggest in labor theory of value that it is a human labor power which makes any commodity valuable, and in terms of its use and exchange value. So according to Smith and Ricardo, that is the human labor power which makes any commodity valuable, right? Because they produce that product and they make it valuable, that is in terms of use and exchange, right? If they will not produce the commodity, then how will you use that commodity? Or there, when it has not been produced, then there will be no exchange values. This proposition influenced the Marx to a great extent, which he subsequently modified, explained the emergence of surplus value and the surplus labor. We'll discuss about this in our later lectures. Then the concept of alienation. The concept of alienation used by Marx in his writing is derived from Hegel, as he was influenced by Hegel. According to Feuerbach, man projected the best attribute that he can think of an entity called God. For Marx, alienation involves a sense of detachment of the worker from their own labor and objects they create. Alienation is what? That is detachment, right? So Marx used the concept of this alienation in the sense of detachment of the workers from their own labor and the object they create. They create the object, but they don't feel like that is their object, that is their creation. They create just for the sake of the creation. They don't have any attachment with their creation. This is alienation. According to Marx, alienation takes place in four ways. Workers lose control over what they produce because they are producing it for someone else, that they are producing for the owner, so they lose control over what they produce. Workers lose control over their own activities since they sell their labor for wages and treat the productive process only as a means of substances. So alienation is they don't have any attachment with their produce. What they produce it for someone else, right? They don't have control on their work because they work for someone else as per the instructions given by someone else, right? Because they sell their labor for the wages, and this is not a productive process. They do this for the as only a means of substances for the survival. Workers have to produce mechanically with no creativity or mental engagement because instructions has been given to them and they have to produce the things. They don't have any attachment with their produce, right? They produce mechanically with no creativity and mental engagement. Private labor of workers make them self-centered and individualistic. They compete with each other. This separates them from each other. So this is alienation, that is they get alienated from their produce, they get alienated from their hard work, and they get alienated from each other, right? So alienation, there are he has that Marx has explained the alienation in four ways: that the worker lose control what they produce and get alienated, right? They do this because they mm, get wages for their labor, right? And this is the only means of the survival, and they produce mechanically with no creativity and mental engagement, so they never feel like this produces mine, right? And then because of this competition, or because it's a matter of the survival, they become self-centered, individualistic, and they compete with each others, and they become separated or estranged from each other, right? Class and relations of the subordinates, right? What is the class and the relation of the subordinate? The notion of class is central in writing of class Marx analysis of society, right? Class, according to him, uh, uh, that the class is the one which is responsible for every change. It is the central in the writing. Class is the center in the writing of Marx. According to him, a social class occupies a fixed place in production process and thus in relation to the production. Right? Marx in Capital distinguished the three classes related to three sources of income: owners of simple labor, owners of simple labor power or laborer whose main source is labor, right? Owner of the capital or capitalists whose main source of income is profit or the surplus value, and the landowners whose main source of income is ground rent. So class, there are three classes, right? He distinguished the three classes, that is the worker class, the capitalist class, and the landowner, right? With the ownership of means of production, there emerges two classes: who owns it, haves, and who do not own it, that is have nots. That is, so he has divided the society into two classes on the basis of means of production. The first class is one who owns the means of production, means have it. They call it haves. That is capitalist, right? Capitalist, they own the mode of production. They have factories, they have material, they have raw material, they have machines, they have lands, they have everything. So they owns the means of production. So that is haves. And the second class was have not. They do not own any mode of production. Proletariats, who possesses only their labor power. One can also look into the class in itself notion, which means that all those who are sharing the same relationship to the means of production comprises of class. And see, then he called that class in itself and class for itself, right? Class in itself notion means that all those who are sharing the same relations to the means of production, that is class in itself, those who are sharing the same means of production, right? That they comprise a class, they have a same relation to the means of production. And class for itself, where the members of class are aware of their exploitative situation and come together to resolve it through revolution. So according to him, these capitalists are the class in itself because they are sharing the same relationship to the means of production. And the worker class is class for itself. Class for itself means that class are aware of their exploitations, and they come together to resolve it through revolution. Then he said that one day will come when these proletariats or the working class will convert from class for itself to class in itself. We'll discuss about this, right? Means, relation, forces, and mode of production. Uh, by means of production, Marx refers to the things that are used for production, that is land, raw material, machineries, technology, etc. So by means of production, Marx refers to the things that are required for the production. Remember these terms because we will use these terms you will when we'll discuss the various theories of Karl Marx. For production process, all those have to be put to use. When this happens, people have to interact with each other, right? The social relations that they enter into for productions are called the relations of the production. So means of production means what all things required for the production, right? And the social relation says when these when these enter into for production and are called the relations of the production when we use these means for production, right? Okay. Then forces and mode of production. There are the forces of production and the mode of production. According to Marx, each stage of social history of society is differentiated with each other by how and by what means the member of society is produce the material good for their survival and thus fulfilling their needs. The way commodities are produced are referred to as the forces of production, and this combination of means and production and labor power, right? And Marx identified four modes of production: the Asiatic, ancient, feudal, and the capitalistic mode of production, right? So means of production, what all are required for production. Relations of production is relation of production is when the people interact together, when people have to interact together to produce, that is the relation of production. Forces and mode of that is forces and mode of production is when that is forces of production is the way commodities are produced, right? That is the forces of production. And Marx identified the four modes of production: the Asiatic, ancient, and the feudal, and the capitalistic mode of production, right? Is this clear? Now we'll discuss his theory of Marx, a very important theory, dialectical materialism. What is dialectical materialism? First of all, understand few concepts, then we'll discuss his theory. The word dialectic refers to method of intellectual discussion by dialogues, right? This term dialectic means this is a method of intellectual discussions by dialogues, when you try to solve some problem through dialogues. According to a Greek philosopher Aristotle, it is referred to art of deputation by question and answer. According to Aristotle, another Greek philosopher, Plato, developed this term in relation with his doctrine of ideas. Before Plato, yet another Greek philosopher, Socrates, used the term to examine the presupposition at the back of all sciences. So, this is what is dialect. That is method of intellectual discussions by dialogues through question or answer or through the process of ideas, right? There is one more strand in the meaning of term dialect, that is it is no doubt a process of intellect discussion through dialogue, but one more strand is there, that is it is the idea of dialects as a process. This means that dialect is a process of reason in ascending or descending form. That is, it is a process of a reason. Why this? It is either in ascending or descending form. In ascending form of dialect, one is able to demonstrate the existence of a higher reality, right? And in descending form of dialect, one is able to explain the manifestation of higher reality in phenomenal world of science, that is experiences, right? So there are three laws of dialectical materialism. What are the three laws of dialectical materialism? There are the unity of opposites, negation, and quantitative change to the qualitative change. Before we discuss this, let's first understand this. Dialects theory, Hegel theory, right? A theory to explain change. This is a theory given by the Hegel. This is a theory to explain change. A progressive or development is result of struggle between the contradiction. According to Hegel, there is a progress or development of results of struggle between the contradiction, right? See, there are three stages: stage A, stage B, and stage C. Stage A is known as thesis, stage C is antithesis, and stage C is synthesis. What is stage A? What is thesis? Some contradictions and limitations are there, right? Thesis is it is some ideas which prevails the society. When few ideas prevails the society, when majority accepts that idea, that is known as thesis. Then comes antithesis. After a certain period of time, few ideas develop which contradicts the existing thesis, right? And these ideas which contradict these thesis or the existing ideas are called the antithesis. Less contradictions and limitation. These ideas contradict each other. Then there is a contradiction between the ideas. Because of contradiction between the ideas, the people start grouping. Few feel like that thesis, the first idea is correct, and few feel like that antithesis, another idea is correct. So there is a contradiction between the two ideas, and there is a struggle between the contradiction. And because of this struggle, or the result of this struggle, results in synthesis, that a new idea comes up, that is the antithesis. After some time, this antithesis, the contradictory idea, becomes the thesis, and a new antithesis developed for this new thesis, right? And this is an ongoing process, right? See, thesis, stage A, antithesis, and the synthesis. Some contradiction for Hegel. Each stage and ideas are the engine of history. There are certain ideas, and these ideas prevails the society, and the ideas which prevails the society is known as the thesis. After some time, new ideas develop which contradicts the thesis, and these contradictory ideas are called the antithesis. And then there is a struggle between the thesis and antithesis. The antithesis become thesis in synthesis stage. Then the third stage comes, that is the synthesis stage. Synthesis stage, the antithesis become thesis, and a new antithesis develops for these thesis, right? So this was the idea of Hegel, right? The idea, that is the dialectic theory given by the Hegel, right? On the basis of this, Marx developed the materialistic dialectic theory, right? Okay, he has developed dialectical materialism, right? He accepted the theory of Hegel, right? That contradiction exists in this society, but instead of ideas, he has taken matter as a center position. Matter, that is, according to him, that is material. It is material which is responsible for thesis antithesis stage, right? So there are the three laws of dialectical materialism, that is unity of opposites, negation of negation, and the quantitative changes to quality, right? What is law of unity and the conflict of opposites? The unity states, this law states that there are internal sides, tendencies, or forces of an object or phenomenon which are mutually exclusive but are at the same time presuppose each other. So there are phenomena which are mutually exclusive, totally different from each other, but at the same time presuppose each other. It is inseparable interconnection of these opposite tendencies or contradiction, which is responsible for unity of opposites. That they are mutually exclusive, right? Mutually exclusive means they are totally different, but at the same time they presuppose each other, right? They are this inseparable interconnection. They are separated, they are connected like this, that they are inseparable. This inseparable interconnection of these opposite tendencies is responsible for the unity of opposites. There is no object or phenomena in the world which could not be divided into opposite, like good, bad, right? Large, small, beautiful, ugly. So there is no phenomenon, no objective in the world which could not be divided into opposite. Each and every phenomenon could be divided into opposites. The opposite coexist, and one is inconceivable with and one is inconceivable without other. One cannot exist without other. They are opposite. They are opposite. They are mutually exclusive, totally different from each other, but still they coexist. And one cannot conceived without the other. They are inconceivable without each other. These opposite cannot coexist peacefully in one object. The contradictory, mutually exclusive character of opposite necessary causes a struggle between them. They coexist, they cannot be separated, but they cannot coexist peacefully. They coexist, but they cannot coexist peacefully because of their contradictory and mutually exclusive character. The opposite necessarily causes a struggle between them. The struggle between them goes on every time. The unity of opposite is a necessary conditions of conflict because it takes place only where the opposite side exists in one object or the phenomenon. In this contradiction, the conflict of opposite, that is the main source of development of matter and the consciousness. See, it is the contradiction, that the conflict of opposite, that is this conflict, it is very important. They coexist, the opposite coexist, and they are inconceivable without each other, but they cannot coexist peacefully. The that is contradiction goes on, right? Because of their mutually exclusive because of their mutually exclusive character, and this is important condition for the unity of opposites, is a mutual, is necessary condition of the conflict. The unity of the opposite is necessary condition of the conflict. It is very important that they should coexist. When they will coexist, then only the conditions for the conflict will arise, right? In the contradiction, it is the contradiction, the conflict of opposite, that is the main source of development of matter and the consciousness. So this conflict is responsible, this is the main source of development of matter and consciousness. Development is struggle of these opposite. One opposite or tendency of the two tries to maintain the status quo, and the other counterpart tries to radically change the status quo. That is what Hegel said, that there is a thesis and the antithesis, they coexist. Thesis is the idea which prevails the society, and thesis wants to maintain the status quo, antithesis wants to change the status quo. And during the phase, after certain time, during this third stage, that is in synthesis stage, the antithesis become thesis and a new antithesis develop. So this is the thing, that struggle, that development of struggle is there on the opposite, that one opposite tries to maintain the status quo and the other counterpart tries to radically change the status quo, right? So it is very important, the unity and conflict of opposites, that is unity of opposite is required, that two there are in every object or in every phenomenon, there are certain internal sides which are mutually exclusive, right? They are totally opposite to each other, but they coexist, but they cannot coexist peacefully, right? They are inseparable, they have to coexist, right? They cannot coexist peacefully, and because they cannot coexist peacefully because of their contradictory nature, the struggle goes on between these opposites, and this struggle is a necessary and the required condition for what? This is necessary and the required condition for conflict. When they will contradict each other, then the conditions of conflict will rise and it will change the social order, right? So it is very important that necessary conditions of conflict is required, right? And the conflict of opposite, that is the main source of development of matter and consciousness. This is the main source of development of matter and consciousness, right? So development is the struggle of these opposite, that one of these opposite tries to maintain the status quo and other wants to change that status quo. This is unity of opposite, that opposite you live coexist together but not in peace, they are inseparable. That is, next law is law of negation of the negation, right? Law of negation is what? The term negation was introduced by the philosophy given by the Hegel, but with an idealistic meaning. Hegel believed that negation was present in development of idea of thought, and the history of society also conceived a chain of negation of old social order by the new. So this again, this concept is borrowed by the Hegel. He has given the given the concept. Hegel has given the concept of negation, right? That is but he has given it in the idealistic meaning. He believed that negation was present in development of idea, but the history of the society also consists a chain of negation of old order by the new order, that the old order has been changed into new order. Negation is not something introduced into an object or phenomenon from the outside, but it is result of the object's or phenomenon own internal behavior. Objects and phenomena develop on the basis of their own inherent internal contradictions. They themselves create a condition for their destruction, for change into a new higher quality. This is negation of negation. Negation is nothing. There is nothing. It is not something which is introduced from outside. It exists in the phenomenon or the object, right? What is this? It is an internal development of the phenomenon, that objects and the phenomenon develop the basis of their own on the basis of their own inherent internal contradiction, unity of opposition, because opposition coexist. So this give rise to the internal contradiction, and they themselves create a conditions. Because of these contradiction, they themselves create a conditions for their destructions and for change into the new higher order, right? So we'll discuss this, the theory of negation, in our next class. And the last law was the quantity change to the quality. Then we'll continue with this. Today we'll discuss about the various perspectives. We discussed about the biographical sketch of the Karl Marx, various perspectives of Marx, right? And we discussed about the Hegel theory, dialectical theory given by the Hegel, and we discussed the one of the three laws of dialectical materialism theory, that is unity of opposite. In our next class, we'll discuss the another two laws, that is negation of negation and quantitative change to the qualitative change. Right? Till then, namaskar. Thank you very much.